Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a video for our latest round of technical report writing stuff from the book. I feel kind of lazy, the way the schedule shook out. I think there was no new video content last week, so happy to kind of dive back in right here. So this starts on page 19, looking at pages 19 through 28. And I do like this about our book, don't get me wrong, but this is one of those things that another one that I consider almost misleading, because if you see that in the syllabus, like, oh, we're reading 19 through 28, it's like, man, that's a lot of text. And it's like, well, it's some text that's unique to the book, or maybe I should say unique to the instruction. Most of this is just examples, though. Like, hey, here's how you can see the kind of documents they're talking about, like, oh, here's an example, case document 2-1A. You can see that kind of stuff. But anyways, I like, obviously I'm a writing teacher and I'm a professional writer. So the whole section here on how to write your stuff is always catnip for me. But I was going to say one of the things that I enjoyed about this is that they emphasize basically that actually sitting down and writing is step 4 of the writing process. Now, I know y'all are more advanced than, say, your standard college freshman, but I personally get a lot of composition students where that's what they think it is, just like get in front of the computer and start writing. And it's like, well, if you are in the rare position where, like, you know exactly what you're doing, exactly who you're doing it for, and you know everything about the topic, you might even be able to get away with that. If you are a quote unquote subject matter expert, you might be able to hit the ground running. But for everyone else, they've got, this broken down into several steps here, starting with analyzing the situation. It's like, all right, why you need to write? What is your goal? What is the situation or problem that's making you, write the document? Basically, they spend a lot of words here to do a concept, or to cover a concept you're probably pretty familiar with, which is, what is my overall goal? I would argue that's always what you should be considering in your writing process. But when it comes to a professional document, right? Like, am I writing something that is intended to inform consumers about the latest product that my company is selling? Am I writing, a report, like a review of what we've done this quarter for, the CEO and other C-suite executives that I might be presenting, some kind of report to? Just like, why am I doing this? And, it sounds like I got it out of a Cracker Jack box or maybe a fortune cookie, but this is one of those, like, purpose determines execution, function determines execution. Once you know why you're doing it, it obviously informs how you are doing it. All right. And then, of course, I alluded to this earlier, but they mentioned each document has a targeted audience. And that's one of those things that's true, like, and you can really drill down. Like in my examples earlier, I was talking about, like, hey, maybe I'm writing something for customers versus maybe I'm writing something for upper level executives. But of course, even when you're writing for your customers, right, if that's something that you end up doing as a marketing writer or something like that, it's like, all right, what do you actually know about your customers? You can't just write, broadly. You have to know, all right, who is the demographic? And I think I've mentioned it in previous videos, a lot of companies will create what they call buyer personas. And that's the idea, is to take all of the demographic data they have about their primary customers and come up with mock-ups of, like, this is what, this is Tina. She's a stay-at-home mom. She's had a couple years of college education. They'll tell you, and it sounds very silly to say out loud, but if you are, if you're creating a document, say, for the sales team, then they need to know exactly who these customers are in order to facilitate their sales approach. Anyway, I need to move on to the next step, I think. All right, discovering information. So this is on the bottom of page 19, and then it continues. No, it doesn't. It just ends there. There's several pages of example text after that. That's why I was double checking. But it's like, all right, when you try to figure out what your reader needs from you, basically, as a writer, how you think your reader perceives the subject. And they have a thing here that I'm always preaching to my students, and if I'm being honest, I think my students just hate to hear it a little more each time, perhaps. But the idea of writing as this sort of iterative process, because it starts out with, you're writing down what you know. Begin to list ideas you can use to develop your topics. What additional information do I need to locate? And I like that. I wish they'd elaborate on this, but they have a thing in here. Don't like what you wrote, delete it. You may want to begin your document with writing your purpose at the beginning to help you stay on track. So again, they're spending quite a few words here to tell you that this is still a this is you at most maybe starting to figure out what you're going to lay out. What am I going to get into here? And it's like, they don't use the B word, but this is basically brainstorming, right? Like, hey, what do I think we need to include? And then you think about it a little more like, wait, I'm gonna have to clarify this. And it's like, oh, wait, I'm talking about this, but first I got to figure this stuff out. So you're getting these things kind of lined up. And it all starts, as they helpfully point in there, like, what does my reader need, and what does my reader know? And what does my reader believe already about this subject? And all of these things inform how you actually write something, right? It's like, what does my reader, already know? It's like, well, if you're writing some kind of background info, like there's plenty of even basic memos that start out with a summary of what's been going on. It's like, okay, well, how much I summarize and how detailed I get depends entirely on how much my audience already knows about this stuff. All right, and then it's like, all right, what does my audience know? What does my audience need from me? And that goes back to is it just customers? I want them to buy my product. It's kind of like Charlie writing speeches, and it's always sunny in Philadelphia. Money me now. But am I writing, earlier it's like maybe I'm writing something for these executives or putting a presentation together for company executives. What do they want to know? Is this just information for the sake of information? Are they looking to make some organizational changes, and my information is going to affect, what they do or do not do? So once you know what they need from you, you know what you need to provide for them. All right. And of course, how you think your reader perceives the subject. I always feel like whenever we're talking about writing, we're also talking about marketing. And I'll always think about that cute Mad Men bit where Don Draper's like, don't like what people are saying, change the conversation. And it really is good advice in terms of marketing and in terms of writing. But of course, you can't change the conversation, quote unquote, until you know what people, already know about this subject, or at least perceive about this subject. It's going to affect how you, for instance, like ever since the COVID pandemic popped off, remote work, understandably, has become more popular than ever before. And hey, if you're watching this, you're doing remote education. It's probably kind of a popular idea with you. But for many years, people were resistant to the idea of going fully remote. And there's still plenty of managers, plenty of CEOs and like executives that are against this idea. So maybe you are writing a document for a company that is considering whether they should move to this, knowing that at least some of your audience has an existing bias against this, that is going to inform what you write and, of course, how you write it. All right. So in the book, if you jump past several pages of examples here, this continues on page 25, talking about arranging information. So this is obviously a close cousin to what we're just talking about. Like, all right, once you start getting an idea of what you are going to write about, it's like, all right, what kind of order do I want to put this in, and why? So the book has some helpful stuff here, like, okay, you're writing a memo that normally begins with key information, important like background information. Similarly, you're writing some kind of report. It usually has a brief introduction, then a summary of the report before you start getting into like, here's exactly what we did, here's what the findings of the experiment are, stuff like that. So just kind of, again, it all goes back to the audience and the kind of document you're creating, right? As you can imagine, if you are writing for high level, decision makers within any organization, they want that info quick. They want you front page, tell them the most important stuff, right? And versus, and I don't know, I'm just mentioning this because I hope this doesn't sound like I'm talking down to you. I have taught countless college students, and a lot of college students will be like, all right, it's constantly the struggle of, oh, this guy's making me write a 5-page paper. What a monster. So always coming up with more information. And sometimes there's a conscious or even like subconscious desire to, oh, I'm going to save the best information for last, as a kind of basic technique to keep people reading. And that works if you are writing like general text for a general audience. It might be enough to just keep them reading. But again, if you are creating something for upper level decision makers or maybe your own boss in particular, it was like, yes, they want that information quickly. You need to give that up front, and then everything else is expanding on what you've already shared. And arranging information, like on a most literal level, I do this every day, literally every day as a freelance writer, where I'll be laying out my articles and I'll look at it and it's like, okay, is this a logical order? And then I have to put my mind in like, some of my readers aren't going to know as much about this topic as I do. So I'll go back in and I might have sections that are like, what is blah, blah, blah? Why is blah, blah, blah so important? Information that I know, but I have to step back and realize my audience doesn't know that. So I have to add this and I have to rearrange certain things so that this, parses, it flows for just about everybody. All right. Bottom half of page 25, they talk about the drafting process, the actual writing process. And most of this, ironically, like this is what you already know. This is what I said earlier. Most people immediately do. Like, all right, time to write, time to sit down and keyboard cat my way through all of this. So there are a few things in here that you're probably already doing, but it's worth mentioning. It's saying that like you may want to type the names of your main segments, boldface those, and insert information beneath the appropriate segment. So the book, I don't think uses, they do, and then a few sentences down, but it's basically talking about how that you can create personal headers that might become headers that stay in the paper. So this is, again, what I do as a freelance writer. Like, all right, you need 1,000 words on what topic? Okay, so I will usually lay out about 8 sections that are intended to become my subheaders. It's like, all right, 100 words for the intro, 100 words for the conclusion, about 100 words for each section, 8 sections done. So I'm a real big believer in creating these headings. And the reason I'm emphasizing so much, there's got to be some of y'all like, I know about headings, old man. But it's just, you don't really do a lot of headings in academic writing, writing stuff for Composition 1 or history or something. You may or may not be using subheaders at all. But as some of y'all now know, hopefully most of y'all now know after putting together your PowerPoint presentations, like, organizing information around headers. It's what readers generally expect when they go to like a website article or when they sit through a presentation. They want you to tell them the key points very quickly. And so I know for a few people on the PowerPoints, it was a kind of struggle where they would have like lots of long text. I had to be that guy constantly. Got to condense it. So you can potentially save yourself a little time here by going ahead and creating the subheaders that you're going to write around. It's like, all right, I know I know mostly what I want to share with my reader, and I know mostly what I can fit in these sections. It can ultimately say, I know this sounds like I got it out of an English teacher fortune cookie box, but this is a little planning can actually save you a lot of time on the actual task of writing. Now, they throw out a thing here that I swear I didn't bribe them to put this in the book, but they point out the idea that writing is it is a process. As I said a minute ago, an iterative process, which is a fancy way of saying you write something, then you come back to it and you edit and you rearrange and you rewrite. You're meant to do that. Now, the book throws in one bit of advice that I had never heard this explicated before. And as I read it, I realized this is actually what I do in my writing process. Talk about on a subconscious level. Talks about like while you're writing, in the age of word processors, it's very easy just to make corrections as you go. But their suggestion is if you change any of what you're reading, if you change any of what you're writing as you're writing it, it should only be things that enhance the meaning. So like if you suddenly think of a better word or a slightly better phrasing, like, all right, my reader will understand this more. The other stuff though, like you're correcting grammar, punctuation, you're figuring out like, I should use a slightly different word over here. I'm a little repetitive. That's the kind of stuff you would normally do as part of an editing process or revising, which is the very next thing. So that they're basically like, keep everything in its place. Don't let the editing and revising on the fly trip you up to the point that you can't actually, get this done, or at least not in time. All right. Revising is pretty straightforward. They have 5 sections there. We're talking about organized by subheaders, organized by bullet points in this case. But 5 different sections, most of which are pretty straightforward. We'll review them real quick. I keep an eye on the clock. I do need to move on a little bit. Got a few more pages to go over. All right. So the first thing, and one that I've already kind of talked about, logic. Does the order of everything and the way you wrote it out, does it make sense? They give you the classic advice. I always give this to students as well. Read your text out loud. The way I always say it to my students, and they always get sick of hearing it probably, is that your ear will often catch mistakes that your eyes won't. Because like everybody, every college student at least, knows what it's like to, write a document, rewrite a document, edit a document. Eventually, you've stared at that thing for like hours and hours, and you're getting ready to turn it in. Like, let me read over it one last time. And it's like, okay, your eyes are probably going to look over the thing, that you've been reading over and over. You're far less likely at that point to notice any errors. But if you say it out loud, and all of a sudden you'll realize, your eyes might not have noticed how awkward a certain section sounds until you said it out loud, like, oh, yeah, I need to change that. All right. And then completeness, have you covered everything? It's like, does your presentation seem complete when it comes to your purpose? Have you considered your readers' needs? Have you provided everything they require? All that fun stuff. Style is one of those things that newer writers, sometimes they see the idea of writing style and they think it's just flourishes. Like, oh yeah, he's a funny writer. Oh, he's a scary writer. It's like, well, I mean, that can be what writing style refers to, but in this book in particular, style is very literal. Like, hey, do we have a kind of a uniform appearance? Like, do all my paragraphs have topic sentences like they're supposed to? Do they all start with a similar layout for topic sentences? So we have a uniform appearance for readers. Are all my sentences actually supporting what I'm talking about, or any of them just kind of like taking up space and, we need to ditch those, etc. And then, of course, watch the length of your paragraphs. And it always depends on the document that you're writing, right? If you have some sort of detailed report about an experiment your team did, you probably want lots of info. But most of the kind of things we've been talking about, like little memos, summaries, presentations, it's more, as we said earlier, about quickly presenting that information. So I mean, again, I hope it don't sound like I'm talking down to you, but it's almost like switching off your college student brain. Because the college student brain is, I need to say as much as possible. I need to take up rooms. This guy making me write 5-page papers, what a monster. And then like you're actually writing documents in the corporate world and the professional world. It's like, no. They want short and sweet, usually. Usually the issue is that your paragraphs are too long, in the quote unquote real world, not that they're not long enough. All right. Illustrations, if you have them, or maybe if you need them. It's like, do you need tables, photos, graphs, drawings, or videos? And I keep saying this, I feel repetitive, but like, it all depends on what you were doing. You just finished those PowerPoint presentations, and we talked about like, you have too many slides and no imagery, it's just blank, might as well be dead. But of course, you write like a college paper, most of those do not have illustrations. So it really is, depending on what you're writing, and of course, it sounds like a cliche almost at this point, but anything that you include, it needs to enhance your overall meaning. You don't want to throw in images just for the sake of images, but I'm throwing in images that will help my reader further understand my meaning. All right. And then document design is basically like, as it says here, how you arrange information, how you display it on the page. So they don't really, for once, they don't spend too many words on here, but it boils down to, does this actually look good? And most of the time as writers, we focus on content, which, we should. But here it's like, hey, visually, does this look inviting? Is it easy to scan? Or is this the kind of thing where like, I always joke with people like, oh, you turn the page in a book, it's like, oh, giant wall of text. And you have an immediate, I have a PhD in English. My immediate visceral reaction to wall of text is, I don't want to read that. So it's like, all right, document design. Does it look, does it actually look inviting, easy to read, legible, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last thing, of course, is just proper editing, where it's like, hey, and they recommend 2 rounds of editing. Like first is looking for spelling, punctuation errors, general grammar errors. But then the second edit is looking more like some of what we've been talking about. Can I improve how this sounds? Do I need to shift some things around for a more logical order? Does it look good, etc.? And then, of course, I swear it's in the book. I'm not just editorializing as a professor, but if your document requires some kind of citations, it probably won't be MLA like you're doing in Comp 1, but if it requires some kind of citations, you want to make sure you have that information in there. And I mean, I'm not just saying that because I'm a college professor. It's like, don't plagiarize. But also the idea that when you're creating these documents for quote unquote the real world, a big thing is data-driven information. If you're writing for the decision makers of the organization, they want, raw info. They want researched info in order to help them render that decision. So you need to not only have such info, but you need to have proper citations for that info when they inevitably want more about it. All right. So I asked you to read pages 31 through 33. And they are important. I'm not trying to downplay their importance, but it's also like, I don't know if there's really much I can add to it. It's just a cheerful reminder that like, once you are writing professionally, you're not just writing for you. And so you have certain ethical responsibilities and considerations. So like when it comes to your own writing, this sounds like a no duh as I say it out loud, but like your journal, your fan fiction, your whatever, most of the time, your messages to friends and stuff like that. Those weird Snapchat messages you keep sending. These are all just personal messages. You're responsible only for yourself. And so to whatever degree ethics inform your writing, it's like, well, it's your personal sense of ethics. But it's like once you are, writing on behalf of an institution, it's like, all right, you need to know what their codes of conduct are, what their standards of practice are. You want to avoid, making any sort of ethical mistakes that you didn't even realize were ethical mistakes. I'm sorry, it was in the book. I felt like it was almost insulting to you. Pages 31 and 30, the lower half of 31 and the top half of 32 are basically just trying to sell you on why you should be ethical. Call me an optimist. I just kind of assume most of you are ethical creatures and did not need the hard sell on why ethics are important. I guess if you do need the hard sell, if nothing else, like it'll get you fired if you screw up. So, all right. And that brings us to, man, like you got almost bust out the magnifying glass. They have an example when it comes to codes of conduct, standards of practice. They have the 6 principles for Society for Technical Communication. It was almost like unintentional comedy. I was thinking 6 principles, that doesn't sound so bad. And then it's like, these are the 6 principles. So I'm like, oh, it's very, very detailed principles. All right, I got you. All right. And then the last thing that they have, pages 47 through 50, they cover how to deal with unethical situations and then how to write collaborative. I'm actually going to, since we were just talking about ethics, I'm going to tackle this section in slightly reverse order here because it's talking about like managing unethical situations. And they have a lot of generic but good advice in here. And then one very specific bit of information that I wanted to emphasize and draw your attention to. All right. And so here it is. It's like unethical situations. Maybe you've got a boss or a colleague that is asking you to do something and it's like, oh, this sounds wrong. This does not sound ethical. And so it's like, what should you do? It's like, well, first you should ask for some sort of explanation, or negotiation. Like maybe you didn't understand it. Give them a chance to talk it out with you, etc. In the meantime, you can also review your code of conduct. So like, we were just talking about that. If they're asking you to do something unethical, we're not just saying to your personal sense of ethics, like your company's code of conduct. You can revert to it like, hey, are they in violation of this? Now, the part that I think is super important and I wanted to draw your attention to, it's like, if your investigation and deliberation fails to quiet your moral doubts, explain in writing, if possible, that you don't feel comfortable doing X, but you could do Y. The in writing part is clear because a lot of organizations, including mine here at the college, our email is like an official communications thing. They have a record of everything that I send, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you are in a corporate world, if you'll pardon my French, this is how you cover your ass. If somebody is asking you to do something that, clearly violates the company's code of conduct, you can send them an email like, hey, I'm sorry, I'd like to be a team player, but I was reviewing code of conduct and this looks like it would violate, subsection C. I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I might be able to do this other thing instead. So you can start a dialogue. But the important thing there is you now have an official record that somebody in your organization is asking you to commit an ethical violation. That is something that you can, if needed, forward to your manager, or maybe your manager is the problem, you can forward that to HR. So I'm not going to look in the eye and say HR is always looking out for you. They are always looking out for the company. But if it's your own boss that is creating these ethical conundrums for the company, HR does want to know about that. And you should be able to walk away the winner from that. All right. So anyways, that is I want to shift over to the other thing. This is on page 47, writing collaboratively. And this is one of the sections where the book had some good info, but most of it was about the actual act of collaborating. Like, hey, you might be, earlier we were talking about remote workforces. You might be working with people from around the world. So you do need to consider that different people have different standards, different ways of communicating, even different ethical ideas. So you want to be mindful of that. I think we had an earlier video about ways that you might collaborate or otherwise work with people of different cultures, et cetera, et cetera. And they talk about obviously you got to figure out deadlines, always important. Deadlines, can't go away from them. And then you need to know who is going to do what. And so it's all right, most of the time this ends up being straightforward. Hey, there's 4 parts to this document. There's 4 of us. Let's do it to it. But you need to clearly outline that early on so nobody is working over each other and otherwise getting in each other's way. Now, they point out the need to have a team leader. And the leader doesn't need to be a hierarchy thing, I'm the boss. But this is literally someone who's kind of, if you've ever heard the expression herding cats, somebody who's responsible for herding everybody in here. So it's all right, what does the team leader do exactly? They're saying, well, a team leader is going to, keep everybody on task, remind them of their responsibilities, their deadlines, provide info they might need, provide miniature deadlines. If the big deadline is, hey, the document is due on the 14th, a team leader might be like, all right, we're going to have the initial draft done by the 8th. We're going to have first round edits on the 10th. We're going to have final round edits on the 12th and submit it on the 14th. Something like that. Monitoring development, obviously, if anything pops up. And then, of course, it's usually the team leader. This is more advice from the book that I think is good advice. You want, no matter how many people are working on this, no matter how many cooks you have in the kitchen, you want to have one person do the editing. That way, the final document, no matter how many of you worked on it, has generally the same kind of voice. And an editor is also going to make sure parallel construction, sentences are starting the same way, headers are proper, all the stuff. It looks like one person did it. That's the goal. They have more info on what should team leaders do. The first one, maintain a positive attitude. And I know as I say that to you, that sounds like some kumbaya bullshit, but I mean, everybody has had a stressful project. Everybody has been part of group work where they hated it. So a team leader actually being we can do this. We're almost there. You got this. That actually does go a long way towards motivating people or just getting them to get their stuff done. Respecting your team members. I mean, again, you don't have to be an annoying, boss, but there is a boss-like quality where you get out of your workers what you put into them. If you show them respect and courtesy, you get respect and courtesy. It's just like that. Frequently asking for questions. It is meant to be a collaborative effort. Everyone should be able to pipe up with important info. And of course, keep records of communications. We're going to circle back to that. And then, what are the individual team members doing? Keeping to the schedule, respecting each other, taking comments, this is such another cliche phrase, but constructive criticism. I'm going to shock you here. Writers tend to be kind of sensitive. There's lots of how dare you give me notes? And so you do need to kind of harden your heart. This isn't your great American novel. This is a document that, your company is relying on, your teammates, your bosses are relying on. And let's be frank, whether it's good or not might determine how many of you keep your jobs. And so it's put your ego aside. You need to be able to take, these suggestions seriously and implement them. You want to always do your part of the project. You don't want to be like I said, everyone's had everyone's had collaborative projects, group work projects where they ended up doing all the work. So it's you don't want to be the slacker in these things. You don't want the others to take advantage of you. Report their asses if you have to, but you don't want to be the one that's not pulling their weight on the big important collaboration. All right, last thing I'm going to mention on that, and last thing for this video, because I know the video has been going a bit long, is I mentioned this so much, I might as well get a sponsorship from them. But Google Docs is really, really wonderful for collaborating with each other. And so Google Docs, you can actually share. Sorry, I got a weird email. With Google Docs, you can actually share a single document with each other. No matter where you are, you can be typing on that. You can send messages for each other. You can leave notes with each other. And I just mentioned that because I've already closed the book. But one of the first things they had in there is collaboration, figure out where everybody's going to meet. And I was just kind of internally shaking my head. Modern collaboration, people usually aren't physically meeting. It's just having a collaborative online document. And depending on where you work, you might have all sorts of tools that'll make this happen. Microsoft Teams can really facilitate this kind of thing. But even if you got nothing else, Google Docs is completely free. Best way to collaborate. Great way to collaborate on school projects as well, not just your future soul-sucking corporate work. All right, that's about it for me. Y'all know the deal. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. And looking forward to hearing from you. Bye.